Stop trying to become impressive. That is the first mistake. The people who leave the deepest mark on your memory rarely announce themselves. They don't dominate every conversation. They don't desperately search for attention. They don't perform confidence like actors on a stage. Yet somehow, when they enter a room, the atmosphere changes. People notice. Conversations become quieter. Eyes follow them without realizing it. Even those who dislike them cannot ignore them. Why? Because they possess something far more powerful than charisma. They possess presence. And presence is not a gift. It is built. For centuries, philosophers tried to explain why some individuals naturally commanded respect, while others spent their entire lives chasing approval. Few understood this better than Niccolò Machiavelli. Most people misunderstand his work. They think he taught manipulation. He taught perception. He understood that before people judge your intelligence, your morality, or your competence, they first judge something much simpler. They judge your presence, your aura. And once that first judgment is made, almost everything that follows becomes filtered through it. This is why two people can say the exact same sentence, yet one sounds powerful while the other sounds insecure. One inspires trust, the other invites skepticism. Nothing changed except perception. The dangerous aura begins there. Not with words, not with achievements, but with the silent message you communicate before opening your mouth. Most people unknowingly destroy their own presence every single day. They rush, they over-explain, they laugh too quickly, they apologize before they've done anything wrong. They fill every silence because silence makes them uncomfortable. Without realizing it, they communicate one message to everyone around them. I need you to accept me. Semitun need is always visible, and visible need destroys authority. Think carefully. When someone constantly seeks validation, how do they appear? Predictable. When someone constantly explains themselves, how do they appear? Defensive. When someone constantly tries to prove their worth, how do they appear? Uncertain. Power never needs to advertise itself. The sun never announces its arrival. It simply rises. The ocean never asks permission to exist. It simply occupies space. True presence works the same way. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It simply exists with complete certainty. Machiavelli observed something about human psychology that remains true today. People rarely respect those who constantly seek to be understood. Why? Because explanation often reveals insecurity. Every unnecessary justification tells others that their approval matters more than your own judgment. Imagine two people declining an invitation. The first says, "I'm really sorry. I've had such a busy week, and honestly, I've been exhausted lately. I hope you understand. Maybe next time." The second simply says, "I won't be able to make it." Nothing more. Who appears more certain? Who seems more comfortable with themselves? Confidence is not measured by volume. It is measured by restraint. The dangerous aura begins when you stop feeling responsible for everyone's opinion of you. There is another mistake almost everyone makes. They confuse visibility with influence. Modern culture rewards exposure. Post everything, share everything, explain everything, react to everything, but influence has never belonged to the loudest person. Influence belongs to the person whose presence carries weight. Imagine lifting two boxes. One is enormous but empty. The other is small but filled with iron. Which feels heavier? People work the same way. Some speak endlessly, yet leave no impression. Others say very little, and every sentence stays with you for days. The difference is density. not quantity. Every unnecessary word makes your presence lighter. Every unnecessary explanation reduces mystery. Every unnecessary emotional reaction gives away another piece of yourself. Soon, there is nothing left for people to discover, nothing left to wonder. And mystery is one of the strongest psychological magnets in existence. Human beings cannot resist unfinished puzzles. This is why unanswered questions stay in your mind longer than answered ones. This is why unresolved stories become unforgettable. The brain hates incomplete information. It searches constantly for closure. Powerful people instinctively understand this. They don't reveal everything, not because they're hiding, because they understand curiosity creates attention. Attention creates influence. Influence creates authority. The goal is not deception. The goal is psychological economy. Reveal only what serves your purpose. Everything else remains yours. One of the greatest misconceptions about a dangerous aura is that it requires becoming cold. It doesn't. Coldness often reveals fear. People who pretend not to care usually care the most. Real strength feels different. It feels calm. Calmness is incredibly rare today. Look around. Everyone reacts instantly. Everyone argues immediately. Everyone broadcasts every emotion. Very few people can remain composed under pressure. And because calmness is rare, it immediately attracts attention. Imagine two leaders facing the same crisis. One begins shouting, speaking faster, blaming others. The second lowers his voice, slows his breathing, listens before speaking. Which one feels safer to follow? Which one appears stronger? The answer has nothing to do with intelligence. Everything has to do with emotional stability. People unconsciously borrow certainty from those who remain composed. If you remain calm while everyone else panics, you become the emotional center of gravity. Others naturally orbit around you. This is why mastering yourself always comes before influencing anyone else. Machiavelli understood that kingdoms are lost long before battles begin. They are lost inside the ruler's mind. Fear creates mistakes. Pride creates blindness. Desperation creates dependence. A dangerous aura cannot exist inside a desperate person, because desperation leaks through every action. It appears in rushed decisions, in forced conversations, in excessive texting, in constant reassurance seeking. Even if nobody can explain why, they feel it. Humans evolved to detect emotional instability long before language existed. Your nervous system communicates before your voice ever does. Now, consider another uncomfortable truth. Most people are addicted to being predictable because predictability feels safe. They always answer immediately, always agree, always accommodate, always remain available. They believe consistency earns love. Sometimes it does, but constant availability rarely earns respect. What is always available slowly becomes invisible. Think about the air you breathe. It keeps you alive, yet you almost never notice it. Why? Because it never disappears. Scarcity creates appreciation. Abundance creates blindness. Your attention works the same way. If everyone always has unlimited access to you, your presence loses psychological value. This doesn't mean playing games. It means protecting your energy. Stop treating your attention like something with infinite supply. It isn't. Every conversation costs time. Every emotional investment costs energy. Every unnecessary obligation costs focus. Guard these resources carefully, because people value what appears valuable, and something constantly given away rarely feels precious. Now, let's address the greatest myth of all. Many believe dangerous people intimidate others. Actually, the most powerful people rarely intimidate intentionally. They simply refuse to shrink themselves. There is an enormous difference. One comes from insecurity, the other comes from self-respect. When someone constantly tries to appear powerful, they usually aren't. Real authority doesn't perform, it radiates like gravity, invisible, constant, impossible to ignore. You don't need dramatic gestures. You don't need dominance displays. You don't need aggression. You need congruence. Your words, your actions, your posture, your decisions, all pointing in the same direction. Internal certainty. Nothing is more magnetic than someone completely aligned with themselves. Here's your first exercise. For one entire day, practice saying less. Not because you're afraid, because you're observing. Notice how often you explain things nobody questioned. Notice how often you interrupt silence. Notice how often you seek agreement before expressing an opinion. Then stop. Allow pauses. Answer briefly. Smile without explaining yourself. Let people wonder what you're thinking. You may feel uncomfortable. That's normal. You've spent years believing visibility creates influence. Now, you're learning something deeper. Restraint creates gravity, and gravity creates presence. By the end of today, don't ask yourself whether people liked you. Ask yourself something far more important. Did your presence leave an impression? Or did you disappear into the noise? Because a dangerous aura isn't created by becoming louder than everyone else. It's created by becoming impossible to overlook without demanding attention. And this is only the foundation. You have been taught that power belongs to the loudest voice, that if you want respect, you must constantly explain yourself, defend yourself, prove yourself. But look closely at the people who truly dominate every room. They rarely rush to speak. They rarely interrupt. They rarely argue. And when they finally say something, everyone listens. Why? Because silence has a psychological weight that words can never match. Machiavelli understood something most people never discover. The person who speaks the least often controls the conversation the most, not because silence is magical, because silence forces everyone else to reveal themselves. Think about negotiations. Who usually loses? The person desperate to fill every pause, the nervous employee, the anxious boyfriend, the insecure friend, the politician trying too hard. They speak and speak and speak until eventually they expose every fear they were trying to hide. Confidence never feels rushed, only insecurity does. Most people cannot survive 10 seconds of silence. Silence feels dangerous because it removes certainty, and the human brain hates uncertainty. The moment you stop explaining yourself, other people begin explaining themselves. Have you ever noticed this? Someone insults you. Instead of defending yourself, you simply look at them. No anger, no smile, no reaction, just silence. Watch what happens. Within seconds, they begin talking again. They justify, they clarify, they laugh nervously. They try to convince you they were just joking. You didn't defeat them with words. You defeated them with uncertainty, because uncertainty is psychologically unbearable. Humans would rather receive bad news than no information at all. The unknown is always heavier than the known. That is why mystery creates authority, and oversharing destroys it. Today, people reveal everything. Their breakfast, their emotions, their plans, their relationships, their frustrations, their goals. Every thought becomes public. Every feeling becomes content. Every opinion becomes another post, but every revelation makes you easier to understand. And people never fear what they completely understand. Imagine a magician. If he explains every illusion before performing it, would anyone be amazed? Of course not. The mystery disappears. Power disappears with it. Your life works exactly the same way. Every unnecessary explanation removes another layer of mystery. Every unnecessary apology weakens your position. Every unnecessary confession hands someone another piece of your psychological blueprint. Soon, they know exactly how to manipulate you. They know what makes you guilty. They know what makes you angry. They know what makes you insecure. And once someone owns your emotional map, they can guide your behavior without you realizing it. This is why powerful people reveal themselves slowly, not because they are dishonest, because information is leverage. Once given, it cannot be taken back. Machiavelli constantly warned rulers against exposing too much of themselves. A predictable ruler becomes an easy target. The same principle governs ordinary life. If everyone knows exactly what you will tolerate, they will push exactly to that line. If everyone knows exactly what makes you emotional, they will use it. If everyone knows exactly what you desperately want, they control you. Your desires become chains. Silence cuts those chains. Notice something interesting. People often say, "I just want honesty," but that isn't entirely true. What they really want is predictability. Predictable people make others comfortable. Dangerous people do not exist to make everyone comfortable. They exist to remain free. Freedom requires unpredictability, not chaotic behavior, controlled unpredictability. The difference matters. Chaos is emotional, strategy is intentional. The dangerous person does not surprise people randomly. They simply refuse to become automatic. Most people answer messages immediately. You don't always have to. Most people explain every decision. You don't always have to. Most people react instantly. You don't always have to. The pause becomes your weapon. Every pause sends a message. I choose my response. I am not controlled by urgency. I decide the rhythm. The one who controls the rhythm controls the interaction. This principle appears everywhere. Watch interviews with world leaders. Notice how often they pause before answering. Not because they don't know, because waiting creates gravity. Fast responses feel emotional. Measured responses feel deliberate. People mistake speed for intelligence, but wisdom almost always arrives slowly. Now, let's examine one of the greatest mistakes people make: explaining boundaries. Imagine someone asks for another favor. You don't want to do it. Instead of saying, "No, I'm unavailable," you say, "I'm really sorry. I've been busy. I've had a difficult week. My schedule is crazy. Maybe next time." Notice what happened. Your boundary became negotiable. The conversation shifted from your decision to your justification. Now they attack your reasons. "Oh, it won't take long. You'll have plenty of time." You're overthinking. Your explanation created an opening. Silence closes it. Powerful people understand something simple. A decision does not require a courtroom defense. It requires clarity. The less emotional energy you spend defending your choices, the more others accept them. Not because they agree, because certainty is contagious. Indecision spreads doubt. Certainty spreads authority. Your tone teaches people how to treat you, not your words, your certainty. That certainty grows inside silence. Another mistake: answering every accusation. People say something false. Immediately, you defend yourself. Why? Because you believe every lie deserves correction. It doesn't. Some lies collapse under their own weight. Others grow stronger the more attention you give them. Attention is fuel. Silence starves them. This doesn't mean becoming passive. It means choosing your battles with precision. The lion does not chase every barking dog. It continues walking. Imagine how exhausting life becomes when every opinion demands your response. You spend your days fighting strangers, convincing critics, explaining yourself, defending your character. Eventually, your entire identity becomes reactive. You stop leading your own life. You begin responding to everyone else's. That is not power. That is slavery disguised as politeness. The dangerous aura begins the day you stop volunteering explanations nobody requested. It begins the day you stop trying to win every argument. It begins the day you become comfortable letting people misunderstand you. That sentence frightens most people because they fear being judged. But understand this: people already judge you. They always will. No explanation has ever stopped human judgment. It only postpones it. Machiavelli understood appearances matter, but chasing universal approval is impossible. The more people you try to satisfy, the less respect anyone has for you. Ironically, people trust those who seem unconcerned with constant validation. Not arrogant, grounded. There is a difference. Grounded people don't rush. Grounded people don't panic. Grounded people don't perform. Their silence communicates, "I have nothing to prove." And that sentence, without being spoken, becomes louder than any speech. Now let's explore another overlooked law. Never reveal your next move too early. Excitement makes people talk. Wisdom makes people build. Many dreams die because they were announced before they existed. You tell everyone your plans, they praise you. Your brain receives the emotional reward before doing the work. Motivation disappears, nothing gets built. Meanwhile, the truly dangerous person says very little. Months later, results appear. Success becomes the announcement, not the intention. There is no stronger statement than unexpected achievement. It requires no explanation. Results speak a language no argument can defeat. This creates another psychological effect. People begin wondering what else you're capable of. Mystery expands. Respect follows. Because competence hidden beneath humility feels more powerful than competence constantly advertised. This is why silence is never empty. Silence creates anticipation. Silence creates curiosity. Silence creates emotional tension. And tension captures attention. Words release tension. Choose carefully when you release it. Your aura is not built by speaking more. It is built by making every word expensive. Imagine your words cost $1,000 each. Would you waste them? Would you gossip? Would you complain endlessly? Would you argue online? Probably not. Every sentence would matter. That is how powerful people communicate. Few words, maximum impact. Because they understand something everyone else forgets. The value of a message depends less on its length and more on the scarcity of its delivery. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is compressed authority. And once you master it, people will begin listening before you even open your mouth. There is one question that reveals more about your power than your money, your status, or your intelligence. Who can control your emotions? Think carefully. Who has the ability to ruin your entire day with a single sentence? Who can send one text or refuse to send one and instantly change your mood? Who can make you angry before breakfast? Who can make you anxious while doing absolutely nothing? If someone else can control your emotional state, then they already possess more power over your life than you realize. Most people believe power means controlling others. Machiavelli understood something far more important. The first kingdom every ruler must conquer is the one inside himself. Because if your emotions rule you, someone else eventually will. Every manipulation begins with emotion. Fear, guilt, hope, desire, jealousy, approval. The manipulator doesn't force your decisions. They simply pull the emotional strings attached to them. And the tragedy is this: most people never notice the strings. They believe they are making independent choices, when in reality, they are simply reacting. Reaction is the opposite of sovereignty. Look around. A stranger leaves a rude comment online. Someone spends hours thinking about it. A coworker ignores your greeting. Suddenly, you're questioning yourself. A friend forgets your birthday. You replay it for weeks. One unpleasant conversation, and your peace disappears. Ask yourself honestly, who is living your life? You, or everyone who knows how to trigger you? Machiavelli observed that rulers who governed through emotion rarely stayed in power. They became impulsive, predictable, easy to provoke, easy to manipulate. Every emotional outburst exposed another weakness. Every uncontrolled reaction became intelligence for their enemies. Human relationships work exactly the same way. People study you constantly, not consciously, psychologically. They notice what excites you. They notice what hurts you. They notice what flatters you. They notice what makes you defensive. Without realizing it, they begin constructing a map of your nervous system. And once someone owns your emotional map, they rarely need force. A few carefully chosen words become enough. That is why emotional discipline is terrifying. Not because it hides emotion, because it removes leverage. Imagine two people entering the same conflict. The first explodes immediately, raises their voice, interrupts, defends every accusation. The second listens quietly, breathes, waits, responds only after thinking. Which one appears stronger? Almost everyone instinctively respects the second person, not because they are louder, because they seem impossible to move. Stillness creates psychological gravity. People naturally orbit around emotional stability. Chaos repels, calm attracts. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb. Many people misunderstand this lesson. Suppressing emotions is not strength, it is delayed weakness. Eventually, everything you've buried demands interest. Real power is different. Real power means feeling everything without becoming owned by anything. Anger arrives. You notice it. Fear appears. You observe it. Embarrassment surfaces. You acknowledge it. But none of them become your commander. They become visitors, not rulers. Think of your mind as a castle. Most people leave the gates open. Every criticism walks inside. Every compliment rearranges the furniture. Every opinion steals something valuable. By sunset, their emotional home belongs to strangers. The dangerous person locks the gates, not to isolate themselves, but to decide who enters. Emotional sovereignty is permission. Nothing enters without your approval. This becomes obvious during confrontation. Most people fear silence because silence forces them to face their own emotions. The emotionally sovereign person welcomes silence. They understand something profound. The first person who loses emotional control usually loses the negotiation. Watch any heated argument. Eventually, one person becomes louder, faster, more desperate. Meanwhile, the calm person barely changes. Suddenly, the emotional balance shifts. Observers begin trusting the calm individual, not because they're automatically right, but because calmness signals internal confidence. Our brains associate emotional control with competence. This is ancient psychology. Long before civilization, panic endangered survival. Calm increased it. That instinct still exists. People follow those who remain composed under pressure. Now, let's examine one of the greatest emotional traps: the need to be understood. Someone misunderstands your intentions. Immediately, you begin explaining, clarifying, defending, trying desperately to correct the story. Why? Because misunderstanding feels threatening. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Sometimes people misunderstand you because they lack information. Sometimes they misunderstand you because they prefer the version that benefits them. No amount of explanation changes that. The emotionally sovereign person recognizes the difference. They explain once, clearly, respectfully. After that, they let reality speak. This saves enormous emotional energy that most people waste chasing impossible approval. Approval addiction is emotional dependence wearing polite clothes. It whispers, if they like me, I'll feel safe. If they praise me, I'll feel valuable. If they reject me, I'll collapse. Notice the pattern. Your emotional state becomes outsourced. Other people become landlords of your self-worth. You simply rent your identity from them. The dangerous aura begins when you reclaim ownership. You stop asking permission to exist. You stop negotiating your value. You stop begging reality to make everyone comfortable. Instead, you become internally anchored. Anchored people are difficult to manipulate because every manipulation depends on emotional instability. Think about guilt. How often have you agreed to something simply because you felt guilty saying no? Not because you wanted to, because you couldn't tolerate the emotion. That's important. People weren't controlling your behavior, they were controlling your discomfort. Master your discomfort, and manipulation loses its greatest weapon. The same applies to fear. Most fear isn't physical, it's social. Fear of disappointing someone, fear of criticism, fear of rejection, fear of looking selfish. These invisible fears quietly govern entire lives. People choose careers they hate, stay in relationships they outgrew, remain silent during injustice. All because emotional discomfort feels unbearable. Machiavelli would likely call this voluntary servitude, chains that exist entirely inside the mind. Break those chains, and your external life changes almost automatically. Now consider this question. Why do insults hurt? Not because of words. Words are sounds. They become painful only after interpretation. Someone calls you weak. Immediately, your mind searches for evidence. Maybe they're right. Maybe people think that. Maybe I really am. Notice what happened. The insult didn't wound you. Your agreement with it did. The emotionally sovereign person interrupts this process. They hear the words, examine them. If they're true, they improve. If they're false, they move on. No drama, no obsession, no emotional prison. Criticism becomes information, not identity. This mindset changes everything, because suddenly, people lose access to your emotional switches. Imagine trying to provoke someone who refuses to react. Eventually, you stop trying. Manipulators behave the same way. They seek easy emotional returns. If every attempt fails, they move elsewhere. Your calmness becomes protection. Not because it's intimidating, because it's unprofitable. Now, let's discuss emotional patience. Modern life rewards instant reaction. instant replies, instant opinions, instant outrage, instant decisions. But wisdom operates differently. Wisdom creates distance between stimulus and response. Every extra second increases clarity. Every pause weakens impulse. The dangerous person develops this habit deliberately. Before responding, they breathe. Before speaking, they observe. Before acting, they evaluate. These tiny pauses appear insignificant, yet over years, they completely transform character. Because character is nothing more than repeated choices, and repeated choices begin with repeated pauses. Eventually, your emotions stop dragging you through life. Instead, they become advisors, helpful, important, never dictators. Imagine the freedom, no longer needing revenge, no longer fearing criticism, no longer chasing approval, no longer collapsing after rejection. You still feel everything, but nothing owns you. This is emotional sovereignty. This is inner authority. This is the invisible foundation beneath every dangerous aura, because the strongest presence in any room is rarely the loudest. It is the person whose inner world cannot be invaded, the one who remains steady while everyone else reacts, the one whose peace cannot be purchased, cannot be threatened, and cannot be stolen. That person carries something no title can provide. True power, not over others, over themselves. And history has always shown the same lesson. The person who cannot be emotionally conquered is almost impossible to defeat. There is one law above all the others. One principle that silently governs every negotiation, every relationship, every friendship, every opportunity, and every position of power. It is simple. The person who needs the least controls the most. Read that again. Not the richest, not the smartest, not the strongest, the one who is most willing to walk away. This was one of Machiavelli's deepest insights about power. Dependence is invisible slavery. The moment your happiness depends on another person's approval, they own part of your life. The moment your identity depends on keeping everyone happy, you stop living according to your values. Instead, you become a performer, a professional people pleaser. You measure every word, every opinion, every decision, not by what is true, but by what keeps others comfortable. And slowly, without realizing it, you disappear. Your personality becomes negotiable. Your convictions become flexible. Your standards become optional. Until one day, you wake up exhausted, wondering why your life feels empty. The answer is painful, because somewhere along the way, you traded authenticity for acceptance. Most people never notice this trade. It happens gradually. One small compromise, one unnecessary apology, one favor you didn't want to do, one relationship you stayed in too long, one opportunity you accepted because you were afraid to lose it. Each decision seems harmless, but together, they become a prison. The dangerous aura is impossible without freedom, and freedom always requires one thing: the ability to leave. Imagine two employees. The first desperately needs the job. Every criticism terrifies them. Every meeting creates anxiety. Every request becomes an obligation. Why? Because they believe they cannot leave. Now imagine the second employee. They perform exceptionally well, but they also know, if necessary, they can walk away. Notice the difference in energy. The second person negotiates calmly, speaks honestly, sets boundaries, not because they're arrogant, but because fear no longer controls them. Nothing is more persuasive than someone who doesn't negotiate from desperation. People can feel it. Desperation has a smell. Neediness leaks through your voice, your posture, your decisions, your timing, your silence. Everything communicates it. You don't need to announce insecurity. Others detect it instinctively. And predators, whether in business, relationships, or everyday life, move toward it naturally. Not always consciously, but predictably. Machiavelli understood that power belongs to the side with options. Options create leverage. Leverage creates freedom. Freedom creates confidence. Confidence creates presence. And presence creates authority. But where do options come from? They begin inside. Before you can walk away physically, you must learn to walk away psychologically, walk away from approval, walk away from perfection, walk away from guilt, walk away from the impossible mission of making everyone understand you. Because here's the truth, some people will never understand you, not because you failed to explain, because understanding you would require them to question themselves. And many people would rather misunderstand you than confront their own limitations. Accept this. It will save years of emotional exhaustion. One of the biggest mistakes people make is confusing loyalty with self-sacrifice. Loyalty is noble. Self-abandonment is not. There is a difference. Loyalty says, I'll stand beside you. Self-abandonment says, I'll disappear so you can remain comfortable. One builds relationships, the other destroys identity. The dangerous person knows exactly where that line exists. They love deeply, but never blindly. They give generously, but never compulsively. They forgive wisely, but never endlessly. Because every healthy relationship requires mutual respect. Without respect, love eventually becomes obligation, and obligation eventually becomes resentment. This is why boundaries are acts of love, not only toward yourself, but toward others. Clear boundaries create clarity. Unclear boundaries create confusion. Confusion creates frustration. Frustration creates conflict. The strongest people understand something simple. Every yes has a hidden no. When you say yes to everyone, you're saying no to yourself, no to your health, no to your dreams, no to your peace, no to your priorities. Eventually, your own life becomes an afterthought. That is not kindness, that is neglect. You can't build a dangerous aura while abandoning yourself every day. Now, imagine entering every room with this belief. I would enjoy being accepted, but I do not require it. Notice how everything changes. Your posture changes, your voice slows down, your decisions become clearer. Because your identity is no longer waiting for external confirmation. This is psychological independence, and independence is magnetic. People trust those who trust themselves. Ironically, the less you chase approval, the more respect you receive. Why? Because respect follows certainty, not performance, not perfection, certainty. Think about the people you've admired throughout your life. They weren't trying to become everyone else's favorite. They simply knew who they were, whether others approved or not. That certainty became unforgettable. The dangerous aura isn't built by pretending to be fearless. Fear never completely disappears. The difference is this: ordinary people obey fear. Powerful people acknowledge fear and continue anyway. Machiavelli never argued that courage meant the absence of danger. He argued that effective people act despite uncertainty, because waiting until fear disappears means waiting forever. Now, let's address the greatest illusion of all. Many people believe becoming powerful means becoming cold, detached, emotionless, cruel. They misunderstand everything. Real power doesn't make you less compassionate. It makes your compassion intentional. Instead of helping everyone, You help those who truly deserve it. Instead of giving endlessly, you give wisely. Instead of saying yes automatically, you choose consciously. Your kindness becomes stronger because it is no longer driven by fear. It is driven by choice, and choice is the foundation of dignity. Imagine two kings. One gives gifts because he fears rebellion. The other gives gifts because he genuinely wishes to reward loyalty. Externally, the actions look identical. Internally, they are completely different. One is controlled, the other is free. That difference is invisible, yet everyone feels it. Your energy always reveals your motives, even when your words don't. That's why dangerous people don't chase influence. They cultivate character, because character quietly shapes every conversation, every negotiation, every first impression, and every final decision. Eventually, people begin treating you differently, not because you demanded respect, because your behavior quietly taught them how to treat you. You no longer tolerate disrespect. So disrespect becomes rare. You no longer beg for attention. So attention arrives naturally. You no longer fear rejection. So rejection loses its power. Everything changes because you changed first. This is the paradox. The dangerous aura has almost nothing to do with making other people fear you. It has everything to do with becoming someone who no longer fears losing what was never truly yours. Approval, validation, control over other people's opinions. Those things were always illusions. The only real power has always been internal. The ability to remain yourself. Under pressure. The ability to remain calm. Inside chaos. The ability to remain honest when deception would be easier. The ability to walk away when staying would cost your dignity. That is what people feel. Not your clothes, not your status, not your words, your internal freedom. Freedom radiates, dependence leaks. Choose carefully which one you're broadcasting. So before this video ends, I want you to ask yourself one final question. Who would you become if you stopped living for approval? If criticism no longer frightened you? If rejection no longer defined you? If silence no longer made you uncomfortable? If your worth no longer depended on anyone else's opinion? Who would be left? That person is the one you've been searching for all along. Not a new version of yourself, the original one. The one hidden beneath years of conditioning, the one buried under guilt, fear, people-pleasing, and endless compromise. Bring that person back, protect them, strengthen them, because the world does not need another agreeable mask. It needs people whose presence cannot be bought, whose values cannot be negotiated, and whose peace cannot be stolen. That is the true dangerous aura. Not intimidation, not manipulation, not cruelty, but absolute self-possession, the kind that enters quietly, speaks deliberately, walks confidently, and leaves an unforgettable impression long after the room is empty. If this message challenged the way you see yourself, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel and join a community dedicated to mastering psychology, power, self-discipline, and timeless wisdom inspired by Machiavelli, Stoicism, Nietzsche, Jung, and the greatest strategic minds in history. And before you go, write this in the comments. I choose self-respect over approval, not for anyone else, for yourself, because the moment you truly believe those words, your transformation has already begun.